200,000 personnel, more than 300 warships, and a single objective: the gateway to the Pacific. In October 1944, the world's largest naval battle erupted off the Philippines, where 4 interconnected clashes determined control of vital resource routes and the future of a nation under immense strain. But the true scale of this battle only hints at what really happened here. What forced so many to risk everything? And why did Leyte Gulf become the turning point that changed everything about the war in the Pacific? Across the waters east of the Philippines in October 1944, the world's largest naval armada assembled. More than 200,000 men, sailors, pilots, and support crews stood at their posts, each one a thread in a vast web stretching over hundreds of miles. Over 300 Allied warships, from massive aircraft carriers to nimble destroyers, faced nearly 70 Japanese vessels, including the largest battleships ever built. The battle lines were so extensive that 4 separate engagements erupted almost at once, each one capable of deciding the fate of the Pacific. The numbers alone are staggering, but behind every statistic was a nation's hope or fear. For the Allies, this was the chance to reclaim the Philippines and cut Japan's vital supply lines to Southeast Asia. For Japan, it was the last stand of an empire, fought with every remaining ship and every last drop of fuel. In these crowded seas, the outcome would shape not only the war, but the lives of millions waiting on distant shores. The scale was unprecedented, and the consequences would reach far beyond the horizon. At the heart of the Pacific, the Philippines stood as the crossroads of an entire war. These islands formed the lifeline between Japan and the oil fields, rubber plantations, and rice paddies of Southeast Asia. Whoever controlled this gateway controlled the flow of fuel, food, and raw materials, essentials for any nation at war. Japanese convoys carried oil from Borneo and Sumatra north through these narrow seas, while American submarines and bombers hunted them relentlessly. If the Allies could cut these routes, Japan's factories and warships would grind to a halt. For millions of Filipino civilians, the battle brought hardship on a scale few could imagine. Families hid in flooded fields, food became scarce, and the sound of distant guns never faded. Oral histories recall days spent in makeshift shelters, separated from loved ones, watching homes destroyed as armies closed in. One survivor remembered spending days hiding in wet fields with little food and the constant sound of guns. Many families were separated, and some lost everything in the fires that followed the fighting. The struggle for the Philippines was not just a contest of fleets, but a fight for survival, one that would demand everything from those caught in its path. Japanese naval planners gathered in war rooms, facing a reality that left little room for hope. Their last operational fleet was about to be divided into 3 separate forces, each with a mission that depended on the others and on timing down to the hour. Vice Admiral Ozawa's Northern Force, built around 4 aircraft carriers, was stripped of most of its planes and pilots. Its real purpose was not to fight, but to act as a lure, a decoy meant to draw the powerful U.S. Third Fleet away from Leyte Gulf. To the south, Vice Admiral Nishimura and Vice Admiral Shima led battleships and cruisers toward Surigao Strait, aiming to break through and strike at Allied invasion forces from below. At the center, Vice Admiral Kurita commanded the largest and most formidable group, including the battleships Yamato and Musashi. This central force would attempt to slip through the San Bernardino Strait and attack the American landing fleet directly. Years of Allied submarine attacks had left Japan's oil reserves dangerously low. Many warships left port with only enough fuel for a single round trip, If they had to fight at high speed, even that was uncertain. Ship logs and staff diaries recorded the anxiety of commanders who knew that, if things went wrong, there would be no way home. Officers spoke openly of a one-way mission, and some destroyers were left behind for lack of fuel before the battle even began. The combined fleet's own estimates showed less than 17,000 tons of fuel oil available for the entire operation, far short of what was needed to support sustained battle or recovery. Everything depended on perfect coordination. The decoy carriers had to attract the main American force at exactly the right moment. The southern and central forces had to break through their assigned straits, while the enemy was distracted. One delay, one miscalculation, and the entire operation could collapse. Japanese commanders understood the risks. War diaries from the time speak of sacrifice and desperation, with officers weighing every move against the knowledge that this was likely their last chance to alter the course of the war. The plan was set in motion not because it promised victory, but because no other option remained. At dawn on October 25th, 4 Japanese aircraft carriers cruised off Cape Engano, their flight decks eerily quiet. Vice Admiral Ozawa's northern force looked formidable on paper, but the reality was stark. Zuikaku, Zuiho, Chitose, and Chiyoda together carried fewer than 90 planes, and only about 70 could even take off. Most of Ozawa's pilots were green, and many planes were barely flyable. Maintenance logs from the carriers described empty hangars and a somber mood. One crewman wrote, "We are ghosts riding an empty ship." Yet, from the American side, these ships still seemed to pose a real threat. Admiral Halsey, commanding the U.S. Third Fleet, had spent the night analyzing radio intercepts and sighting reports. The lure worked. Halsey ordered his entire fleet, including Task Force 34's battleships, to steam north at full speed. In the rush, the San Bernardino Strait, the only barrier between the Japanese Central Force and the vulnerable Allied landing beaches, was left unguarded. Message traffic crackled with confusion. Halsey's dispatches described Task Force 34 as formed, but never clarified that it was moving north with the carriers and not standing guard. Admiral Kincaid, leading the 7th Fleet near Leyte, believed the strait was still covered. Admiral Nimitz back at Pearl Harbor sent the now famous query, "Where is Task Force 34? The world wonders." By the time the ambiguity was noticed, the gap had already opened. Ozawa's decoy absorbed wave after wave of American airstrikes. By midday, his carriers were ablaze or sinking, their handful of planes swept from the sky. But the real impact was not in the loss of ships. For several critical hours, the U.S. fleet's pursuit of this fleet of ghosts left the door wide open for Japan's Central Force to surge toward Leyte Gulf, setting the stage for a crisis no one had anticipated. Thunderheads of American carrier planes swept over the Sibuyan Sea on October 24th, hunting for the Japanese Central Force as it pressed eastward. At the heart of that force sailed Musashi, one of the largest battleships ever built, bristling with armor and firepower. American pilots launched more than 250 sorties throughout the day, striking in relentless waves. Bombs and torpedoes found their mark, again and again. Musashi absorbed at least 17 bomb hits and 19 torpedoes, each one chipping away at her ability to keep pace. By late afternoon, the damage was too much. Musashi slowed, then lost all power, finally drifting to a halt. Her crew fought to save her, but the order to abandon ship came as the sun set. More than half her crew would not survive. For Vice Admiral Kurita, the loss was staggering. Musashi was not just a ship, It was a symbol of Japanese naval might. Reports from his flag bridge record a tense debate among senior officers. With his force battered, several cruisers damaged, and anti-aircraft crews exhausted, Kurita weighed his next move. At 3:30 in the afternoon, he ordered a withdrawal to the west, signaling a temporary retreat. For a moment, it seemed the Central Force would abandon its mission. American commanders believed the Japanese had been turned back for good, but the pressure on Kurita did not ease. Communications crackled with urgent requests for air support that never came. Staff diaries describe a sense of isolation and mounting fatigue. The loss of Musashi had shaken morale, and the fleet's speed dropped as ships nursed their wounds. Yet news soon arrived that American carriers were moving north, chasing the decoy force. Kurita, watching his window of opportunity reopen, reversed his retreat late that night. The battered Central Force turned east again, heading for the unguarded San Bernardino Strait. Inside the command rooms, officers wrestled with doubt and exhaustion, but the mission was not yet over. The fate of the landings and the entire Pacific War still hung in the balance. Night cloaked the waters of Surigao Strait as two Japanese battleship groups pressed north, their engines straining for a speed they could barely sustain. Vice Admiral Nishimura's Southern Force led the way, determined to break through and strike at the Allied invasion fleet. But waiting in the darkness was a line of American warships, the 7th Fleet's older battleships, many raised from the mud of Pearl Harbor. For their crews, this was more than another battle. It was a chance to restore the pride lost in 1941. American destroyers and PT boats moved first, slipping through the blackness to launch torpedoes. Dozens of torpedoes raced toward the Japanese column, catching the battleships Yamashiro and Fuso off guard. Explosions rocked the formation, causing heavy damage and widespread confusion. Survivors later described the chaos, fires, alarms, and the sudden loss of direction as ship after ship was struck. Then came the classic maneuver naval officers had studied for decades, the crossing of the T. The American battleship line, anchored by the battleships West Virginia, California, and Tennessee, turned broadside across the head of the strait. Their guns, loaded and ready, unleashed a barrage that swept the Japanese ships from bow to stern. Shells arched across the water, finding targets in the dark. American radar tracked every movement, giving a decisive edge in the confusion. Within 30 minutes, the Southern Force was shattered. Yamashiro fought on alone, sustaining repeated hits until she sank. Fuso had already been severely damaged by earlier torpedo hits. The rest of the Japanese ships, cruisers and destroyers, tried to escape. Some collided in the haze, others limped south with heavy damage. Admiral Shima's following group, arriving late and seeing only wreckage and burning oil, turned back without engaging. For the American crews, the moment was both triumphant and somber. The same ships that had been sunk at Pearl Harbor now stood as guardians at what became the last great battleship duel in history. Official action reports captured a sense of closure. The Japanese attempt to pass through the strait was stopped by coordinated U.S. naval action. With the southern threat erased, the focus of the larger battle shifted elsewhere, but the age of the battleship had ended in the waters of Surigao Strait. Dawn broke over Samar as Taffy 3, just 6 escort carriers, 3 destroyers, and 4 destroyer escorts, faced the full weight of Kurita's battleships and cruisers. Outgunned and outnumbered, the American ships had little choice but to improvise. Rear Admiral Clifton Sprague issued a flurry of orders: launch every available plane, lay smoke screens, and turn the tiny destroyers loose. Pilots scrambled in a desperate effort, some armed with nothing more than machine guns or depth charges, making attack runs to distract the enemy. Meanwhile, the destroyers Johnston, Howell, and Hermann charged forward at flank speed. Commander Ernest Evans of the Johnston didn't hesitate. He ordered a torpedo attack straight at the Japanese line, closing to within 10,000 yards of a battleship 3 times his size. Torpedoes raced through the water, forcing Japanese ships to break formation and dodge. The American destroyers weaved through their own smoke screens, firing as they went, turning confusion into their only advantage. Sprague kept the carriers moving, zigzagging through rain squalls while his ships launched wave after wave of makeshift airstrikes. Air crews dropped anything that might slow the enemy, from bombs to flares to even empty fuel tanks. Torpedo tracks crisscrossed the sea, breaking up Japanese attacks and buying precious time. Every decision was made in the moment, every maneuver a gamble. The Japanese gunners struggled to find targets through the haze, while Taffy 3's ships darted in and out, refusing to back down. The scale of the fight had flipped. Smaller ships, outmatched in every way, had managed to stall giants through sheer will and quick thinking. Lieutenant Commander Robert Copeland, aboard the Samuel B. Roberts, faced the oncoming Japanese fleet with a calm resolve that belied the chaos around him. As shells erupted in the water, Copeland ordered his small destroyer escort forward, engines straining at full speed. He called for a torpedo run straight into the heart of the enemy, knowing survival was unlikely. Crew members manned their stations, each aware that their actions might buy precious minutes for the vulnerable carriers and landing forces behind them. Copeland later wrote, "We were not expected to survive, but we had to try." Nearby, the escort carrier Gambier Bay was caught in the storm of fire. As the ship began to list and slow, sailors scrambled to save wounded shipmates. One survivor, a young signalman, recalled, "There was panic and cold fear. We carried the wounded through flooded compartments, trying to keep hope alive as the ship went down. Those who escaped clung to rafts and debris for hours, battered by waves and haunted by the memory of friends left behind." These acts of courage and sacrifice rippled through the battle. Japanese commanders, facing fierce resistance from outgunned ships and relentless air attacks, hesitated. Confusion spread across their formation. Against all expectations, the order was given to withdraw. The battered survivors of Taffy 3 had done the impossible, turning back a force that should have overwhelmed them. Their determination and unity, forged in crisis, became a testament to the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. Today, the Pacific remains a crossroads for global power. Its sea lanes are still vital, and its lessons are still urgent. The battle's scale reminds us that strategy, resilience, and even miscalculation shape the world we inherit. Every contested waterway echoes with choices made here. As new tensions rise in these same seas, the stakes and the questions are as real as ever. What would you have done in their place?